morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning here in the city of Philadelphia. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. We've got a great show for you today. Working, jobs, business. Let's talk about people working and getting to work. We're also going to talk Indigenous Peoples Day, election, pollution, misinformation, and Eurofocus. That's in the media. Um, it should be an interesting chat. We've got two great guests for you: Jennifer Turnbull with Spiral Q, and Timothy Reimer, who's a regular guest on the show. I'll bring them on in a second. I just want to get some things behind the scenes here taken care of. Get us going out on the YouTubes and the Twitters and the Twitches and all of that. If you didn't know, we broadcast this show on multiple platforms every week. And in order to do that, we could use your support. If you like getting local news and information, especially information and news with the local bent and coverage by people of color and a locally focused coverage, then please consider liking and or subscribing to this broadcast. All the times that you hit the like button or comment or share this to your friends are great for us. It increases our reach, and we really appreciate it. With that said, I'd like to bring on to screen Timothy and Jennifer. If you guys would introduce yourselves, your pronouns, what it is you do. Let's start with Timothy. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Timothy Reimer. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a West Philly resident. I'm a committee person in my neighborhood. I run an RCO. I do a lot of volunteer work in the Cobbs Creek Park area and just generally involved in the community. I also run a construction business.
Awesome. And you're we so it's a little outside of school. Jennifer, before you introduce yourself, I went to a talk back, not really a talk back as theater goers know them, but a listening session with the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance at Spiral Q the other day. And one of the things that the facilitator noted is that we all are multi-hatted. We all everybody participating uh, didn't give just one thing that is what they do. They gave a bunch of things that is what they do because we all do a lot. At any rate, Jennifer, if you would introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do, and talk a little bit about what Spiral Q is, and for those that don't know.
All right. Hi, my name is Jennifer Turnbull, and I'm an artist. I'm a dancer and choreographer. I am a cultural organizer, and I'm a parent. And I also am a co-director of Spiral Q that has been around for 27 years. And I'm really excited to talk about peoplehood and invite you all to come and join us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself there. Um, all right, so let's talk. We for those that don't know the show format, and for those that didn't realize I actually have a format. The format is we usually talk about the arts thing until about 25 after, and then we transition into today's topics. So tell us a little bit about Peoplehood. What is it? Where is it? Why is it?
Okay, Peoplehood is one of the best events in Philadelphia, and it's actually the reason why I first got introduced to Spiral Q. One of my friends, Adrian Lowe, Miller was talking about Peoplehood, was like, oh my God. And Spiral Q does the Peoplehood parade, and it's gorgeous. And, he was like looking up into the sky, and I was like, oh, I respect this person. And you're talking about a place that maybe I want to be a part of. So I stalked Spiral Q for a little while and was like, you want to hire me because I'm a dancer and I'm a great educator and I can learn to make puppets. And then Peoplehood was my first day of work. It was October 20th, 2007. And for me, Peoplehood was the first time that I was able to walk as a whole person. I didn't have to splinter my identities in order to represent myself. I didn't have to be a queer person over here and a black person over there and a gender expansive woman over here. I could just be my full self. And so that is what Peoplehood is. It is an expression of all of everyone as one whole full participatory person, group, coalition of groups. And this year we are really excited about the themes that are bubbling up around protection and celebration, protection of the most marginalized communities that are often in the streets, making sure being community led and community driven, strategic, and really being clear and articulating what their needs are in order for them to be considered and treated with equity in our city, which for me means a lot more investment and not just equal investment. I feel like what's happening out here is like a spray bottle. We're like, oh, it's a fire. Let me get a spray bottle. But that's just me. So anyway, Peoplehood is a really wonderful parade and pageant. We go from we go from Paul Robeson House at 50th and Walnut. We start lining up between 12 and 1 on October 21st. And around 1 we depart and we make our way to Clark Park, and then there is a performance in the park, often a pageant. And this year we're trying to organize the biggest drum circle that you ever saw in the bowl. I'm hoping that maybe we can assemble 300 drummers to welcome the parade into the bowl and be the container for which we have our pageant and performance and different scenes that really illuminate different campaigns and movements that are happening
Awesome.
in our
Um,
city.
any
That's what Peoplehood is.
oh, I see. I got a little glitch there. I talked over you. I apologize, but that's what peoplehood is, was your last statement there. Um anything what do people need to know to participate in peoplehood? What do people need to do to come see peoplehood, be part of peoplehood, do the thing as it were?
Well, if you go to www.spiralq.org and you click on projects and initiatives and go down to Peoplehood Parade, you will come up to this amazing page. So it's also spiralq.org/peoplehood23/. You'll be able to see all of the information. There is a link to a very comprehensive art build document that tells you when you can come to open builds. If you're an individual who is really interested in making a little something and you want to come, please sign up. If you are a big group, we don't have a huge amount of capacity right now to make a big thing, but we definitely want to make sure that we're taking care of our people. So please reach out, and we will figure a way to be able to support you. Um, the build days right now that we have left are Thursday, October. What's Thursday? October 12th from 6 to 8:30.
That's
We
tomorrow.
Yes, that's tomorrow. We have Saturday and Sunday, both Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 5. And then next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, from 11 to 9, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. We will be making things. We'll always need lots of help. We need help flyering the route to make sure that all of our residents along the parade route know what's happening and they know that we're coming along, because we love to make sure that our neighbors know that we're going to come onto their streets and make a whole bunch of noise and celebrate. Um, there's this, I think now maybe 96-year-old grandma that lives on one of the in one of the stoops, or that we see every year, that lives on one of the streets, and it's a real joy to see her and her family there gather for people. So we want to make sure that people know. So we do need volunteers for that. We have plenty of machining and painting to do, and it is a real joy to be able to support our activist groups that we're really centering in our parade and art making in support of. And the work that they make in for the parade specifically is youth in direct actions, beyond peoplehood. We come, and it is a wonderful celebration for all of our community members. We're definitely centering our activist partners as part of peoplehood, so that we can really, facilitate lifting up and really amplifying those messages, making sure that people can't ignore and that they understand what's happening, because everyone is hardwired for art, for visual art, for music and sound, for movement and dance. So yeah, we would love to see you there.
Awesome. What do you in the history of the organization? How old is Spiral Q? Because I know your work most recently from like the election counter revote rally, other stuff like that. How long has Spiral Q been around? How long have you all been doing stuff like this?
Oh my goodness. So Spiral Q has been around for 27 years. Uh, Maddie Hart began this organization in 1996, and it really began in the streets. He was, surrounded by his queer community that was being basically taken down by AIDS and HIV. They're in the beginning of the epidemic, and really, at the height of it, and wondering what he could do to support his peoples. Right, we're dying out here. What are we gonna do? And so he brought the art form of giant puppets and street theater to Philadelphia's ACT UP, um, sector, and it's been a long relationship since then. ACT UP is our first, activist partner, as you will, and it was a real joy to know, during the early pandemic days, and during the general election time, that this is our founding. This is where we began, and we were never confused about what we were gonna do. When everybody was like, "Oh my God, we have to pivot. Oh, what are we gonna do?" And I was like, "Okay, well, we were born during an epidemic. Why is it any different during a pandemic?"
Right,
Right?
right.
We just, like, epidemic is a horribleness here, and the pandemic is a horribleness here.
Everywhere.
We just gotta go. We gotta go big. We gotta go hard. This is what we were born for. And from there, our work, really expanded and literally spiraled out into working with other activist partners who were like, "Oh, can you bring some of these amazing, big, spectacular, unavoidable, undeniable artworks, to be able to communicate our messages for our campaigns?" Um, and our artists also simultaneously are educators all the time. And so they started doing work with youth in and out of schools. And so from there, our art education and youth art education residencies began to really grow. And we've always done, some level of community art projects, which really is the same thing all across the way, making sure that the people who need to be heard and have been silenced under many different structures to silence us are not silenced. Again, because art is hardwired in all of us, and it is one of the most powerful communication tools that we have access to. Art.
Yeah, one of the things that I've always been interested in slash admired about the Spiral Q ethos is that the idea that everyone is an artist. A lot of people are concerned when, like, like in participating in something like this, like, I'm not a good artist. I don't know how to make puppets, whatever. Like, what do you how do you get people who haven't been actively practicing their ingrained art to find it again?
I mean, it's always there and you're always utilizing it. This is what, I'm a dance educator and I love to teach people how to dance and just be in their bodies and move. I'm just like, you do this all day long. You communicate and move with your body all day long. Your actions speak louder than your words. If I'm like looking like this and I'm walking around all grumpy, then then you know what's going on, right? You can see it, right? But if the words that come out of my mouth are completely counter to that, you still are like your words are not worth it, right? If I say I'm so happy, I'm the best I've ever been, uh, right? You're not gonna believe me because I'm already moving and communicating with you through my body, right? The way that you communicate with your sound, right? With your music. If you're stomping around, you're making these sounds, you're making this music, you're communicating, right? And then what are you wearing? What's happening with your body, right? Like how are you dressing yourself? All of these things, you utilize them every single day and you don't necessarily categorize them as art, but it is art, right? Everything that we make and we create, design is art. The way that we frame our cameras, every day people taking pictures. I mean, some people take horrible pictures, but a lot of people are concerned about the way that they look and the way that their pictures are looking. That's an artistic practice. I'm not saying that you are like, a professional photographer, because there are years of craft and education and practice that go into that. If you are professional, right? We're not getting it twisted, but everyone is hardwired for it to have, to be able to communicate and express that, right? Like if you have a horrible job, you're listening to the radio and you're like, okay, it's gonna get me through. I'm gonna be okay, right? Like
Right.
that's right. So it's just about reframing what you already know and experience every single day, and it's common knowledge and it's common sense.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I would say the common knowledge, quote unquote, is
Not
that
common.
that well, I'm not good at something, so I'm not gonna try it. I'd say it's. I think you do. I think you do everybody. That you being Spiral Q, I think Spiral Q does everybody that they touch a service by bringing that knowledge back to them. I think people lose sight of that knowledge once they get, like, I don't know what happens. Do people like just get this negative feedback in their teens or something, and like,
Yeah. Oh, okay, okay. So, William Penn has done, studies on this, and we've been part of these studies, and it's because it's not funded. It's not funded. It's not funded. It's not cared for. If we're thinking about if we're thinking about budgets as a moral document, it's not funded. Nobody who is in power cares about it unless it is part of a sector that is part of the economy and the production of money. It's just not funded. If it was valued as a human right, right? As like a basic human right, like everybody needs, but we don't even have those things like the Maslow's whatever, like food, clothing. We don't even have that, right? So art, of course, art is art is art is above that, but it's still intrinsic to us. It's still part of who we are again, right? Like it's what defines human. Well, art is always on that short freaking list. It's always on the short list.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean, I often wonder about, like, why the First Amendment isn't part of the basic human right, the inalienable rights. The right to freedom of speech is as inalienable as it is a right guaranteed by the Constitution. But I don't know. Yeah, we talk a lot about funding on this show. Talk a lot about funding for the arts, and it's easy to.
sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. William Penn didn't say
Not William Penn the person, William Penn
William
Foundation.
Penn the Foundation doesn't say that arts aren't valued and aren't funded. They say that between the ages of, the study that was funded, they say that between the ages of what is it, when you're in the fourth grade to when you're in the sixth grade, your inclination to art sharply declines, and it's it's imperative for you to be continually exposed to an artistic practice in order to keep that interest and that skill level. So that's what the report says and the study finds. And I'm saying it's not funded, and that's why Black and brown and poor people don't have access to it, and it is gone from them, because what is funded is making sure that you can take this test, making sure that you can prove that we can determine what your trajectory is going to be based on these test scores. And if you don't know how to do all of these things completely independently of each other, not integrated into what you actually need to be able to do in the world, then you're not a good student. That's why we don't have exposure to it. It's not funded and it goes away. That's why. That's my, analysis of that.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I'd say that analysis is correct. What I was gonna say is, like, it is a lot easier to get politicians and people in power to fund things when they can see, the basics of business, the ROI of it, the return on investment of it. I'd say, like, a lot of return on investment is more esoteric with art than, I mean, there is a documented return on investment, right? Like, the Philadelphia arts and culture sector contributes uh 3,000% in taxable activity over what it gets donated to it by the public. So, like, for every dollar that the public gives the arts and culture sector, uh, uh, $300 gets generated in economic activity. So, I mean, that's a really good return on investment, for a government. Like, if you're a politician and you're looking for something to spend your tax dollars on, well, you're literally getting your tax dollars back at that point. So it's just easier, yes, to talk to politicians in those in that framework. Um,
I pose the question, what about the return on investment from the people who are doing all of the work?
right. Well, and
What's
that
the
that
return on my investment in labor and time?
right. Well, there is a
You're not
return
paying me for
on
that. You're
no,
not paying me enough for that.
right. No, but there is a return on investment for that too. Like, there's a return on investment in a lowering of social ills, like, like gun violence goes down. Um, People are working, people are busy, people are more it's easier to join the arts and culture sector as an employee or employer or entrepreneur than it is to join almost any other sector because of what, as you say, art is intrinsic to humanity. Everybody can take a skill that they have and translate it into an economic driver. um I wanted to talk to bring Timothy into the conversation a little bit here, and we've been you made some predictions about the last election that turned out to be pretty well, the primaries and the last election really, that turned out to be pretty prescient. um, and my whole goal today with having you as a guest is really just to ask you, is it as foregone a conclusion, the upcoming election in November, on November 7th, correct?
Correct.
Um, the is that election as foregone a conclusion as all the pundits and political, active action folks, the PACs, seem to think it is? Folks aren't spending money on political advertising. They're not doing events. Sherelle Parker has done like three events in the past month that I can think of.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion, the outcome of the election, but based on what the local Republican Party is doing in their work and their run up to the election, it does seem that they have more or less just conceded. So the two big things, obviously, that everybody locally will be concerned about will be the at-large candidates for city council, specifically the two seats set aside for the opposition representation, and then the mayor's race. As you know, David O is running for mayor. You've had him on your show multiple times. I think it was last week or the week before. And Dave is making a real run of it. He's putting forth like the most serious campaign that any Republican has run in decades. I guess probably since Sam Katz. But the party is just not getting behind him. Um, and I mean they have very limited resources as compared to the Democrats. And if from an economic standpoint, spending those resources in the best possible way, it would make sense not to throw that money behind David because nothing short of a miracle would allow him to overcome the 7-1 7-1 Democratic to Republican registration edge in the city. It's a mathematical impossibility that he can win the race. I personally appreciate the hard work he's putting into running the race because it should not be a foregone conclusion. We should be having these conversations about what our elected officials will do. The party itself, or the primary, where a small percentage of voters actually vote, couldn't be deciding who runs our city. So in that respect, the mayor's race is just that one is done. Parker is going to win. No questions asked.
So
Now,
my concerns there, you brought up one of my major concerns, and the reason why I have folks like David O on the show. Parker has no plan with regard to arts funding, with regard to spending, other than she's pledged to spend more money on opening up 300-ish new police positions and filling the staffing of 150 police positions that are vacant by hiring new people, and then adding another 150 patrol officers to the streets. Um, Other than that, I haven't seen any pledges that involves. Well, I'll take that back. She's also pledged to make school year round, which good luck to her. I don't know how she gets the funding for that. But
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, keeping kids occupied, giving them somewhere safe to go, that's good for our children. They have year-round
I
school.
don't disagree, but it's the same
It's not going
problem.
to happen.
Yeah, no, it's the same problem that we've had, that every person that's ever proposed this has. You can't pay teachers for year-round schooling with the amount of funding that schooling has from the state and the federal government.
Well, we could pay teachers to work year-round. There's money to be had, but our school district is not an efficient spender of money. We devote all types of resources. For example, like we have in West Philly, we have two high schools. Um, I guess it's Bartram's High School and Overbrook High School that are, basically more than half empty all the time because they were built a century ago when there were different demographic realities. And rather than combining those schools or closing them down and replacing them with more appropriately sized modern facilities, they're stuck, just leaving them open and spending obscene amounts of money on maintaining them, at a level that is not necessary. So there is money that could be allocated, but the political will to do so would be hard to come by. Um, with what we're going to get with Sherelle Parker as mayor, it's going to be the status quo. You're going to get a whole lot of the exact same that we've had. I wouldn't look for any major changes coming from her office in any way. So then on to the next part of your original question. So
Jen,
the
you feel
at law.
free to jump in
Oh,
anytime. You don't have to raise your
Well,
hand.
I have a question for you, Timothy. So you said that you don't feel like there are going to be any major changes. Um, could you articulate what that means? Because I don't follow politics like that, and so I'm not well versed. But from any of the small snippets that I've seen around wanting to reintroduce stop and frisk as a part of his campaign, I was like, I have major questions here.
okay. Well, so it's interesting you brought up stop and frisk. Stop and frisk has never gone away. We still have stop and frisk in Philadelphia. They stop and frisk tens of thousands of people every year. Um, it's from a legal standpoint, it's what's known as a Terry stop. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not going to try to explain it, but people can look into that on their own. Um,
I can
but
non-lawyerly explain a Terry stop for you.
all right, if
Non-lawyerly,
you want to.
as for those that don't know what a Terry stop is a police officer sees you and thinks that you may have done something illegal or may be carrying something that is illegal. They are well within their rights at that moment, because they suspect you of a crime, to stop you and ask you your name and to ask you questions. You're not required to respond to anything except for your name, which I object to. But in Pennsylvania law, you are required to provide your name and identification if you have it on you or if you have it issued to you. And they are allowed to pat you down, to check if you have any weapons on you, check if you have any drugs on you. Anything that they find as a result of that stop and frisk is evidence that they can use against you in a court case.
That is a very good explanation and perhaps better than I would have done. So the thing is, people believe that stop and frisk went away because the city was sued for the unconstitutional application of stop and frisk, where members of our Black community were disproportionately targeted by officers to be stopped and frisked. Um, I forget the exact statistics, but when it was happening, there was a time where basically every Black man in the city, was stopped and frisked once. I mean, realistically, multiple, the same Black man was stopped and frisked multiple times. Some people weren't caught up, but it was absolutely
And if I
ridiculous.
remember the statistics correctly, I may be wrong, but if I remember the statistics correctly, it's something like 98% of all stop and frisks were African American, Black identified individuals.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the statistics either, but that it's somewhere in that ballpark. It was far out of proportion to their percentage of our society. So what happened is there was a federal lawsuit, and the city had to then start reporting on stop and frisk, which they have been doing ever since. You can go online and find these reports. I don't have the URL handy, but a quick search on Google will bring them up for people. So stop and frisk has always been here. The police, with Parker say so, may feel emboldened to stop and frisk people at a higher rate, but there will be reporting on it, so we will find out one way or the other. I suspect that unless we have a different district attorney, we really won't see much of a change in that, because to me it appears as if the police are sort of on soft strike, because they don't like the DA, and they're not going to work any harder, if they think the DA is not going to support what they do.
Which is ridiculous on the face of it, but I'll save that rant for another day.
Yeah, that's a whole nother giant mess. All right, but so anyways, now to the city council at large races. Um, so we have seven at large city council members in the city, uh, due to our home rule charter. Now, five of them are elected by direct election. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Now, there are two seats that are supposed to be reserved for the opposition. And what happens is whichever person who is not registered as a Democrat gets the most votes, and then whichever person who's not registered as a Democrat gets the second next most votes, get a seat on city council. And since the home rule charter was enacted, the current one, until 2019, that meant two Republicans had a seat on city council as at large. Now, in 2019, as most people, well, maybe not most people, but as people involved in politics know, the Working Families Party, set a new precedent by slowly edging out one of the Republicans. They came in second place behind David O, which is the first time a third party candidate actually was elected to city council. Now, this year, the WFP has gone all in on the city council at large races, and they also attempted to go all in on the city commissioners race, but they royally screwed that up. We'll talk about that next. So we have the incumbent at large councilwoman Kendra Brooks running, and then a pastor, Nicholas O'Rourke, who is also a WFP member, running, and they are receiving massive amounts of money and support, endorsements from all manner of Democrats, and just obscene donations from various political donors.
I
Like
I would I would like to ask a question in your understanding of the race as it exists. The Democratic leadership, the leader of the Philadelphia Democratic Party, um, uh, during the primary and before the primary, issued a directive that anybody supporting Working Families Party's candidates that is a Democrat or a Democratic candidate risked losing the support of the Democratic Party, because in his reading of the Democratic Party rules, they're not allowed to support anybody other than Democrat candidates. Um, that's obviously been trounced by a number of prominent Democrats in the Philadelphia area and in Pennsylvania politics. I mean, Josh Shapiro himself ignored that. A lot of the candidates, Kendra Brooks, um, ignored it like right off the bat. I think Jamie Gauthier also ignored it. And our our second, our lieutenant governor ignored it almost immediately as well. Um, and it's paved the way to now there are a lot of Democrat um, support for Working Families Party candidates. Um, do you is it was it so there's a lot of people in Philadelphia politics who are like, terminally into politics, like I am, like we are, who are like, well, the Working Families Party is just an extension of the Democratic Party. It's just it's just the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. But the leadership of the Democratic Party would seem to say otherwise. Is this a smokescreen to provide plausible deniability, or is this just actually what the Democratic Party wants, a distance from the progressives that are in the Working Families Party?
I mean, I can only give you what I think my opinion on that is because I can't actually speak for the Democrats, but I think Bob Brady and the establishment wing of the local Democratic Party are afraid of losing their power. They've seen progressives slowly chip away and install their own politicians over people that represent the machine. In West Philly where I live, in 2019, Councilwoman Blackwell, the vice chair of the local Democratic Party, was ousted by Gauthier. Um, and then it was the next year or the year after, State Representative Jim Roebuck was ousted by Rick Krajewski, a very progressive guy. Um, and they've got they I forget the guy in South Philly, but they replaced him with Nikhil Saval. You've got Elizabeth Fiedler and a couple other people where they've successfully challenged the Democratic establishment candidates and replaced them with progressives.
I mean, well,
Um,
hold on just for a sec. Let's be clear. Blackwell had pushback from basically the entirety of the people that she represented or claimed to represent. Like she was not a good
I mean, I,
representative for the people.
I mean, Blackwell. I'm not going to disparage her now that she's gone.
Oh, I
But
am.
things are better in the district now that she is not representing us.
No, absolutely.
Um,
No, they are 1,000 times better. The and for better or for worse, people who live in the burbs and will never come to Philly and loudly like to proclaim that online, um, are like they cite politics and politicians like Blackwell as the reason that quote unquote Philadelphia is a failed Democrat city. That the politics of Democrat politics in Philadelphia, this machine politics, the politics of wards and ward leaders, and just this kind of ingrained certain families are the only ones allowed to win in certain districts. Um, that's, I mean, I think both progressives and Republicans to an extent want to see that gone. I think Republicans more selfishly because they just want to see it gone because they don't want they want the an opening to attaining some sort of say in Philadelphia governance. But
well, speaking as a Republican, at least nominally Republican, my values are very to the center as compared to the Republican Party. That the there's no opening for Republicans. Like the only openings that Republicans have are the seats that are reserved for the opposition party. Like that's it. Like we're not gonna, just because Blackwell's gone doesn't mean a Republican is ever gonna get that seat. Like there's just it's a demographic reality that they cannot win. Circling back to what you said earlier about the WFP being a front for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That is absolutely true. The WFP in Philadelphia has the current count is 14 active members registered in the party. For the entire county, our city of 1.6 million people, 14 people does not make a viable third party. Now, if you look at the WFP's Pennsylvania PAC, um, this cycle, the most recent cycle, or actually I think it's all this year. You'll forget me if I've got the numbers slightly wrong. 85% of the funding of the WFP is coming from Democratic candidates. Like 85% of their something like 100,000. In fact, I think I have the numbers. One second, I can pull them up. Uh, okay, yeah. So $83,407, which is just under 84% of the working family, the Pennsylvania Working Families Party's funding, has come directly from Democratic candidate PACs. Kendra Brooks herself is, well, was a Democrat, and she has a history of switching before she was elected as the WFP. She had a history of switching back and forth between the two to vote in Democratic elections. You can verify that, anyone can, by purchasing a copy of the voter rolls from the Pennsylvania Department of State, and you can see everyone's voter history or their voter registration history. You can't see who they voted for, but you can see what party they were in what election. And I mean, those are undeniable facts. Um, they've found a loophole, they've exploited it, and they're gonna most likely get their candidates in unless the Republicans, get their act together in a big way, which thus far they have expressed zero interest in doing.
No, I mean they
The
seem to have started to give some support for the one candidate, Haggerty, is it?
Jim Hasher.
Hasher, Hasher.
Yeah, I mean they have, and maybe that will work, maybe it won't. But if we look at the 2019 election where Kendra Brooks won, we see that she came in second behind David O. The reason David O was able to get more votes than Kendra Brooks is because David is a different kind of Republican.
Well, yeah,
He does not,
he appeals to people who actually look into his policies. He appeals to, progressives and liberal folks, especially classic liberal neolibs, who, would like support, say, Joe Biden or you know uh sorry,
and he
Clinton.
also has a large segment of support in our Asian American community,
Yeah.
in Philadelphia.
Well,
And
the Asian American community is relatively liberal, in
they,
general, and yeah.
they are relatively liberal. I'm sorry, did you want to chime in, Jennifer?
You're on mute.
Oh,
Y'all are going so deep in, and I was just like, okay, for those of us who don't have such deep knowledge of Philadelphia politics, I went to New Orleans recently for a conference, and there was a panel, and someone in the audience. So this is the Greater Philadelphia Leadership Exchange that travels to different cities and learns from them. And so there was a question in the audience from Philadelphian, talking about how Philadelphia had career politicians, and wanted to know what it was like in New Orleans, and they said that it was more like a dynastic.
Yes.
And I was like, oh. And when I'm hearing you say, just hearing all of this conversation, uh and thinking about, oh, only certain families can win in certain districts, and the politics around the wards, can you just talk a little bit about that as a concept in Philadelphia versus other places, and what it means to be a dynastic political family?
Well,
um
so
what does it mean for Philadelphia?
in Philadelphia, we've got, probably the classic example of how a city government ends up being single party and maintaining single party rule, and creates dynastic rule. So the Blackwell family, for instance, has been around Philadelphia and around Philadelphia politics for literal generations, since
50 something years.
yeah. And also has ties to other major families that were involved in Philadelphia politics since before the Reconstruction era. So, there are dynasties in Philadelphia of Philadelphia politics. And the presumptive winner of the upcoming mayoral election, Sherrill Parker, took great advantage of the kind of dynastic system that we have, the ward leaders. So in Philadelphia, one of the primary ways, old style ways to win an election is to get ward leaders on your side. Ward leaders are allowed to determine what gets printed and mailed to all of the registered Democratic voters in their district. Um, and what they often do, and what happened in this case, will print a sample ballot, and the sample ballot has highlighted on it the people that that ward leader supports. So what this really is transactional. It's money. The ward leaders get a couple $1,000s. Towards printing costs. And therefore they highlight whomever gives them the most money. So this is where money in campaigns tends to win campaigns. Sherrill Parker also is Black. She's a woman, and she relied on that identity. She's also LGBTQ, but that part of her identity she didn't rely on as much. Um, but she relied on that identity to win over ward leaders that even though she was giving them the most money anyway, she made sure that they oh, she went to this church. Oh, my cousin went to that church. Oh, I've been to that church. Um, you know, so it's relationship building, identity building, and it's very transactional politics, very commercial politics, in that you're dealing face to face with one influential person in a district. And there's usually money changing hands. There's usually familial and cultural linkage between the two people talking. And that's why progressives didn't do as well in the Democratic sorry, word slipped my head.
Primary.
Primary, thank you. In the Democratic primary, as they possibly would have if people were actually analyzing policies and politics. A lot was said in the media about, Sherrill Parker appealed to people's sense of wanting leadership around crime. But then when reporters actually interviewed the same people that they were talking about instead of just talking about them, they found that those people didn't actually want more cops. They didn't like the idea that stop and frisk would come back. They were against stop and frisk. They were against more cops. They were for more services and more money towards services. They actually, a large percentage of them, supported the idea of defunding police. But Sherrill Parker is a Black woman running for mayor, and I want a Black woman who I know and trust to be the mayor of Philadelphia.
Well, thank you. That I mean, it really opens up a lot for me, and it's like, oh, make it make sense. I see it makes more sense now. Got it.
So I would just like to add in that the calculus with Sherrill Parker winning, the black vote, you can see it based on the geographical distribution of the vote she got. The areas that are predominantly black overwhelmingly supported her over other candidates. But what actually happened was when everybody jumped into the race, initially it was a very crowded field. There were like seven viable candidates at the start, like people who were actually serious and have a qualifications to actually hold the office. Um, and we had former council member Green, Maria Quinona Sanchez, and I'm forgetting who the other person was. But the initially, it looked as if to anyone who was jumping in the race that the black vote was going to be split amongst, or the black and brown vote, I should say, because Maria Quinona Sanchez also has a very strong base in our city's Hispanic community. It appeared as if those votes were going to be split between, multiple candidates, and that really opened the door for other people to come in and say, all right, well, you know, uh, maybe I can sneak in without the support of the Black community or the minority community in our city, even though they make up the plurality of voters. And that's, in a lot of cases, that's really how we wind up with progressive politicians in Philadelphia. For instance, in the 188th, where I live, when Rick Krajewski won, he ran in a four-way race against the incumbent Roebuck, um, a staffer who worked for Roebuck, Karen Dunn, and a ward leader, Gregory Benjamin. And Krajewski came across with less than half the vote the first time he won. Had there not been three candidates that were all fighting for the black vote, he would not have won because basically the white part of his district carried him to victory with a unified vote. Um, the progressives tried again when they tried to oust State Senator Anthony Williams with Paul Prescott, and in a head-to-head straight-up race there, they failed miserably. Um, and then last 2021, the last elections for state reps, where we had the redistricting, there was a new district, the 10th, where unfortunately Almond Brown wound up moving from the 190th to the 10th. But in that one, we had Staj Purple Blackwell, the wife of Janie Blackwell's son, running against a progressive candidate, Cass Green, and then Almond Brown, the incumbent. And the Cass Green almost won, but she was not able to overcome the I don't know if it wasn't necessarily the black vote because that new
It's
district
it's the
is
name recognition.
geographically,
Yeah, it's the name
yeah.
recognition and the dynastic nature of, some elements of Philadelphia politics are very, like I said, transactional. They're very, I know your family, I know your cousin, I know your brother, I know what church you went to, I know your pastor. There is a whole section of the community that I honestly don't have access to because I'm anti-religious, if anything. And it's a large section of the black community that, does vote and is concerned with politics, and is very organized around that because it's an organization in and of itself. Um, I wanted to just touch on. I want to recognize the time. It's 11:04, and I want to just touch on a couple of other things, a couple of the other topics, um, uh, just real quick. We've been very locally focused today, and uh, relatively also, I think, black focused, black community focused. I'd like to, just bring to the collective conversation the Euro focus of most media coverage of things. When you talk about the Israeli versus Palestinian war that's going on right now, and you look at it, look at any coverage of it, it's very Eurocentric, it's very white focused, and then it doesn't even begin to address the reasons, the basic reasons why that conflict even exists, which is Eurocentric in and of itself. Um, I encourage everyone to pull their lens back a little bit when they're looking at topics, especially when they're looking at coverage from folks online or folks in the national media, to pull back from that Eurocentric focus and think about it from your own perspective. As a person who's a descendant of African enslaved people in the chattel slavery system in the U.S. I gotta go, and like, I don't care. Like, at some point, it's not that I don't care who's killing who. What I gotta look at is when people start talking about other human beings as not being worthy of life. I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side of whatever it is you're talking about. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what your basic background or politics is. Everybody's worthy of life. Everybody deserves to, intrinsically, just because they were born, deserves to live. And some would say even that we have a duty to make sure everybody lives, and an imperative to make sure everybody lives, and I kind of agree with that. When I look at this stuff outside of a Eurocentric lens, I look at it from a black perspective. I go, all right, well, there's one group here saying that an entire another group that they rule over is needs to be razed to the ground and all killed. I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side. You need to step back and maybe, like, examine what it is you're saying and who said that about your ethnic group most recently, and maybe go, hey, wait a minute, are we the baddies? I don't know.
I mean, listen, the cycles of violence are not called cycles of violence for no reason.
Right.
I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the situation going on in Israel and Palestine right now is, kind of whatever you want to call it, is absolutely terrible. I'm going to categorically say, what Hamas did in slaughtering innocent civilians was absolutely terrible, vile, and reprehensible. I'm also going to say that the Israeli response of indiscriminately bombing Palestinian territories is also vile and reprehensible. It doesn't matter what side you're on, there is never a valid excuse to murder innocent civilians en masse.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, honestly, not even en masse, just
I
period.
just at all. Yeah. I don't even think
Yes,
that
life
extends
is
to.
the gift.
I
Life is the gift.
Yeah.
Life is the gift.
I don't
Life
I don't
is
think that
the gift.
even, yeah, I think that, like, I mean, if I had my way, we'd disband militaries, but that's obviously not going to happen anytime soon. But um s-
Well, especially, since on Monday it was Indigenous Peoples Day, you know, in honor of remarking that occurrence, which is a new occurrence in our country, we should be looking at this conflict through that lens specifically, and while both groups have a claim, historically to the land, the Palestinian slash Arab people have a much more recent and long-standing connection to that land. They are, for the most part, the indigenous people of that area. There are some Jewish people who have stayed through in the Middle East, throughout the previous 2 millennia, but the truth is the Palestinians are the indigenous people there, and they are they are being subject to, there's no other way to describe it but literal apartheid. And even worse, the response that we're seeing from the Israeli government, um, at a minimum, they're talking about ethnic cleansing, clearing out the entire place, basically. and on the extreme end, possibly genocide. And there are people who are making excuses for that, saying, oh, well, these people deserve it because 16 years ago, less than half of them voted for Hamas.
Right.
And
Look,
that,
dog, in 1946, Israel didn't even exist.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it existed in history. It existed in, in a place that before the diaspora, but at the same time, yeah, again, Eurocentric lens, you had a bunch of Europeans come in and enforce what they thought was, the historical right of indigenous people, but it wasn't even analysis of those people that enforced this indigenousness of the Jewish faith and Jewish people, Jewish ethnicity. Um, they didn't even all believe in that. If you look at the records of what they spoke about and what they believed, they wanted a place where they could send Jewish people and essentially create a ghetto of a state. Um, and that's what Ford wanted. That's what a lot of American politicians wanted that were pro-Zionist.
what the British wanted.
What the British wanted, what even to a certain extent, some Palestinians wanted it because they wanted, and some Arab states wanted it because they thought it would be an easy thing to then eliminate all the Jews. Um, you know,
Well, maybe not eliminate them, but when Israel was founded, most Arab states expelled massive, percentages of their Jewish population. Iraq used to have a flourishing Jewish community in Baghdad, and now you can count them on one hand, basically.
hmm
That, I mean, one side is the one inflicting disproportionate violence, but I think it's fair to note that both sides are wrong in this.
yeah.
They're I think personally, and this is just my personal opinion, that most people on both sides of this conflict, want to just be able to live in peace. How we get there is at some point, the cycle of violence has to stop. And when there is someone who is disproportionately stronger beating on the weaker people, they need to be the ones to step up and make the first move. And they have to be willing to accept that for a while they're going to have to deal with the backlash of their historical injustices.
Well,
And
that kind of would transition into one of the other things I wanted to cover that's hitting really close to home today. The idea of with great power comes great responsibility, and this is a weird transition, I admit, but in traffic, so pedestrians versus cars versus bicycles versus motorcycles versus trucks and trucking. The PA Department of Transportation's social media person today tweeted out a campaign, an ill-advised, in my opinion, campaign. The Heads Up Phones Down campaign they've started tweeting out. And they started tweeting it out actually a couple days ago. I'm a little late to the game. The first tweet about it was 10:20 a.m. on October 9th. And this is a little bit crazy to come from a state Department of Transportation. The idea that the quote is, "Did you know that distracted walking can be just as dangerous as distracted driving?" That's just a quoted question. Like, I'm sorry. The last time I was distracted walking, I stumbled on a twig on the ground and skinned my knee. The last time I was distracted driving, I rear-ended somebody and caused thousands of dollars of damage to their car. Um,
Maybe he's saying distracted walking can be just as dangerous because you could be knocked out by the distracted driver. And so your bodily harm possibility is higher.
I'm sure
Is
that's that.
is that
I'm
what
sure that's what the for
I
first
know?
of all,
It doesn't.
Twitter did a relatively good service here. They did one of the public comments on it and noted that state law in Pennsylvania is that the driver is always at fault and responsible for yielding to pedestrians in marked or unmarked crosswalks at intersections. Um, yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, like first, distracted driving is by far and away the bigger problem. When you're distracted walking, usually you're not going to hurt anyone but yourself. Now, from my own personal experience, I have been hurt by distracted walkers. On South Street, I had, I ride my bike sometimes, and on South Street a couple years back, I had somebody walk out in between two cars, an older gentleman, and just right into my bike. And this was not at a crosswalk, this mid-block. I mean, I fell on top of him, and I hurt my ankle, but he got the worst of it, and I felt pretty bad, but he was literally, at fault here, and it is exactly what they're talking about.
Well,
And
no,
then
what
another,
they're talking about is the
well,
uptick in pedestrian deaths. Pedestrian deaths have superseded the last high, which was 1980. In the United States in 2022, we had 8,126 pedestrian fatalities, vehicular cause fatalities. In 1980, we had 8,070. And the low point was 2010, where we had literally half of that at 4,302. So like suddenly in the last what is that, 12 years, the fatality rate for pedestrians has literally doubled back to what it was in the 1980s. When we make fun of public safety in the 1980s for not really being that safe. um, and it fell every year except for 1988 since 1980, and reached that low point, and now we're suddenly back to where we started. Um,
I I really do think that people walking around looking at their smartphones is part of the problem. It's not the only part of the problem, but the one anecdote I told you, I have others similar. The same thing happened to me on 22nd Street, where a woman stepped into the bike lane without looking, and I crashed into her. And she's playing on her smartphone. When I'm driving, it's at least a weekly occurrence, that a pedestrian, I will see them, just walk into the intersection not looking while staring at their phone.
right, but you're
Now,
surrounded by a couple of tons of metal in a cage that's
well,
designed
it
to
doesn't
protect you.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't excuse me for hitting them,
Right.
but I'm paying attention when I drive, but not everyone else is paying attention when they drive. I think
With
the lesson here
the width
is
grid.
everybody when they're traveling, regardless of the method in which they're traveling, whether it be by car, bike, on foot, one of those crazy scooters you see everybody riding around now, is that be aware of your surroundings and exercise caution. Now, the people
Okay,
operating the heaviest
given.
vehicles have the biggest
Yes,
responsibility,
that's
but
my point.
everyone needs to
Everybody
be,
always has a responsibility to be looking where they're going. I mean, like, I'm not going to walk through an airport with my head down in my phone because I'm going to run into somebody. Like, that's just going to happen. But at the same time, like, yeah, maybe there's some additional distraction to modern day life with smartphones and constant instant notification, instant availability. But the correlation that is possibly causation is somebody mapped the size and weight increase of the average vehicle versus pedestrian mortality, and it exactly correlates. I mean, the graphs are identical. The biggest problem we have in the U.S. anyway with pedestrian fatalities is larger, less vehicles with less visibility and less protections built into them for pedestrians. That's just like scientific fact. Um,
Yeah, look, to give PennDOT just a little bit of credit, yesterday they came out with their some of their proposals for the Roosevelt Boulevard subway extension. And the boulevard is one of the most deadly roads both for drivers and pedestrians that we have in the city. And if we could get some mass transit on there along with some traffic calming measures, which they are proposing, there we would see improvements. I mean, the government one hand doesn't know what the other one's doing, but at least somebody at PennDOT cares and is working to make things safer for us.
Well, the this hits a little bit close to home, and I'm gonna kind of wrap up today with the sad notification of the passing of a friend, Marge Bicknell, who is was a president emeritus of the Philadelphia Dramatists Center, as well as being a prolific writer, and really good person and supporter of the arts. She was often responsible for helping various artists find funding, and find ways forward with their work when other people weren't available to do so. She passed as the result of a vehicle and pedestrian incident on the Art Museum Circle. And I would like to at least wish her family condolences, and hope that her family and friends can be supported, in that there are people working to end the incidents of pedestrian fatalities, even though we're at a high point in our recent history of fatalities with pedestrians and vehicles. Um, it's a thing. We're approaching an era where the ecosystem, the economy, the people's rights and freedoms are all interconnected and interrelated. One of the topics on here was pollution. I just wanted to bring up that there's a recent study, several recent studies have found that things that we do in support of transportation, such as cook certain chemicals into rubber for tires, or paints that we apply to the bottom of boats, are responsible for a large majority of the pollution that's causing catastrophes in populations of flora and fauna around the world. And so recently a study was done that the salmon die-off that's been happening in the Pacific Northwest is almost 100% attributable to the a chemical in almost all tires that are manufactured. And so the tires, as they drive over the ground, they shed, and they shed this chemical, and the runoff goes into the streams. The streams take it to the fish ingest it and die. So there's that. Ending with happy news. Last thoughts, Jennifer, Peoplehood.
Peoplehood, people, everyone come to Peoplehood. You can follow us on social media. We are strongest on Instagram, also on Facebook. You can visit our website at spiralq.org and /Peoplehood 23 / it is October 21st. please join us at Paul Robeson House to Clark Park. Bring your drum, bring your family, your friends, your booze, everybody. It is a community, family friendly, celebratory event, and we would love to see
And
you.
if you don't have a drum, bring a bucket, bring a pot lid, bring something to make noise
Bring
with.
bring anything to make noise with. Bring your hands, bring yourself, come as you are. Um, we would love to have you.
And Timothy, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to amplify Jennifer's message and come out to the Peoplehood Parade. It's an excellent event in our community. We're happy to have them there. Um, Also, the election is coming up. I really don't care who you vote for. Please get out and vote if
Oh,
you're not
you
registered.
posted in West Willie the deadline.
Yeah, the voter registration deadline is October 23rd. If you're not registered to vote, you can register online. We need everyone to get out there and vote. Like I said, I don't care who you support, just, please vote. And lastly, in light of all of the murder and violence and terrible things that are happening in the world, I'd like to share a quote from Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other.
Be excellent to each other. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Jen, if you want to bring voter registration materials to Peoplehood and need any sort of financial support to do that or logistics support to do that, let me know.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
I
Um,
would also be happy to help with that.
Oh,
Awesome.
great.
Stick around in the chat. I'm gonna outro the show, and I have a couple of minutes, like literally like 5, but I'd love to chat with you guys off screen. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm gonna switch to a one up of me, and I'll talk to you guys in a sec. And thank you everyone who joins us every week. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your attention to these broadcasts. Appreciate you looking into issues and thoughts that we share here. Appreciate you attending the arts events that we highlight and supporting the arts in general. If you like what you've seen, please consider donating. Patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. Consider subscribing to our Twitter, our Facebook, our Twitch, our YouTube channel. All of those will give you notifications anytime we go live or anytime we schedule a broadcast. And all are a great way to support us by liking or sharing this broadcast with your friends and anybody else who you think might be interested in what we had to say. Tune in again next week. We'll have another great show for you next Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Until then, have a great rest of your week, everybody.